Welcome back to King Kong Kid Storytime and The Sign of the Chrysanthemum by Catherine Patterson. Chapter 3, The Capital. There was a gentle wind from the south. The boat made its lazy way round the southern tip of Awaji Island and up its eastern coast, past the Straits of Kii, which is the gateway to the great ocean. On board, the sailors impatiently cursed the weakness of the wind, for it was nearly typhoon season, and they were anxious to gain the safe mouth of the Camo River, beyond the reach of sea storms as well as pirates. But Muna knew no such impatience. His belly was at last making peace with the rocking of the boat, and he gazed contentedly out across the water toward the hazy mountain slope of the island in the distance. "How's the belly?" Muna gave a startled jump. The big warrior laughed, then hunched over the side of the boat until his head was at the boy's level. "You haven't told me your name yet, puppy." The boy stared down at the water. "They call me Muna." "Muna? No name? What kind of a name is no name?" Takanobu threw back his head and laughed. Har, har. The sound seemed to carry far across the shining waves. Muna, his face burning, stood perfectly still, resisting the warrior's laughter as though it were a bodily assault. All the insults of a lifetime were bound up with the name No Name. But now he was about to change it. He would find his father and the noble name that was rightfully his. He would show the serfs of Awa and this loutish Ronin. The laughter stopped abruptly. "But who am I to laugh? If you are a boy with no name, you're no worse off than I." He thumped his chest. "I am a samurai with no lord, a Ronin." Grinning, he gave the boy a friendly slap across the shoulders that nearly sent him flying overboard. "A Ronin and a bastard. We make a good pair, eh?" Muna turned and looked boldly at the man beside him. The wide, tan face was framed above with a sloppily bound-up topknot, and below with a beard that seemed to have grown without its owner's noticing or caring. The warrior's blue tunic and trousers were as faded and tattered as Muna's own. His feet were bare, except for wooden clogs. But for the broad black sash that bound the long sword at his waist, no one would have taken him for a warrior. Takanobu took a step backward, planted his feet apart, and placed his powerful hands on his hips. "There now. Do you approve of me, puppy?" Muna stuttered in his embarrassment. I've never before seen a man who called himself a Ronin." "Is that worse than a boy who calls himself No Name?" He reached out, but this time Muna eluded the friendly slap that he feared might send him sprawling. Suddenly the ship was alive with the shouting of sailors. "There, ahead, puppy!" Takanobu pointed. "The mouth of the Camo. We'll be in Ooh, Japanese names. We'll be in Hyankoyu by nightfall." "Just where are you two pirates going?" the captain roared down to the landing stage, where Takanobu had silently shepherded Muna when the old man's back was turned. "Takanobu, I want my fare, or the boy stays aboard." Muna looked up at the angry gestures of the captain and then at Takanobu's haughty face. "The boy goes with me." The Ronin's roar could be heard above the chanting and chatter of Rokuhara port. "Pay me." Takanobu threw both hands in the air in a gesture of transparent innocence. Of course, by my honor. Then, through his teeth, he said to Muna, cross to the capital by Gojo Bridge. Go to Rashomon Gate. Muna hesitated. Like the devil was at your back. Run! He bowed elaborately toward the deck, covering the captain's view of the boy. By the honor of this sword, I swear to you. When? Later, bellowed the Ronin, and he, too, showed his heels, leaving the captain red-faced and sputtering. Muna was small for 13, but easy on his feet. He picked his path across the bridge through the jostling crowd. It was dusk, and his slight form was soon lost among the peddlers and tradesmen on the bridge who had concluded their day's work on the docks or in Rokuhara itself. Clear the way! Clear the way! 4 retainers in silk brocade pushed back the crowd with their halberds, making way for a small, ox-drawn carriage on the way to Rokuhara from Hayanoku. In Awa, not even the daimyo himself possessed such a cart. It was lacquered black, with flowers and butterflies engraved in gold leaf. The retainer's halberd was hard across his chest, or Muna might have dared to reach out to touch the cart. Perhaps his father owned such a carriage. For a moment he could imagine that behind the closed blinds sat a magnificent samurai going to visit Lord Kiyomori, chief of the Hike clan, in his Rokuhara mansion. If his retainers wore silk, what must the man himself wear? And Muna bowed his head to the carriage, in case it carried his father or one of his relatives. Then it was gone, and he began once more to make his way across Gojo Bridge toward Hyakko, the capital of eternal peace, which lay on the other side. For a short way, Muna clung to the street that ran on the east side of the Kamo River, but it was growing dark, and he knew he must ask someone the way to the Rashomon Gate if he were to find his way there that night. He turned eastward into the city at a broad thoroughfare, which, in the warm late summer evening, jangled with the sound of boisterous music. There were many men in the street, and painted women leaned from the windows of the houses, smiling and calling down to them. Just a few coins, an old woman sitting on the doorstoop of one of the houses was calling out to the passers-by. You'll never miss the coins, and you'll never forget your evening. She cackled as a man brushed past her into the house. Then she repeated her sing-song invitation. Hey, you! Muna had been standing before the house watching her, his mouth open in amazement. You! Move along, boy. A face like yours is bad for business. She cackled again when some men lounging beside the building laughed at her joke. A little green for the houses on Rokujo Avenue, wouldn't you say? She asked them, indicating Muna with a point of her nose. They all laughed again. Muna walked on quickly, his head down to hide his embarrassment. It was all too different from his expectations. Was this Hyakko, the capital of eternal peace? Where were the noble samurai with their quiet, graceful ladies? Where were the magnificent palaces and stately temples? Where, by the gods, was Rashomon Gate? Or at least someone he could ask. Would everyone know him for a country fool before he even opened his mouth? Suppose he had lost Takanobu for good. The thought clutched at his belly like a sharp pain. He was alone in this terrible city. He would die, and his father would never know. He would die alone and nameless, and no one would care. Little mother, why did I leave your grave? Muna stumbled through the darkened streets of the city. He passed a temple and considered asking refuge for the night, but the gate seemed high. With his ragged clothes and not even a copper for the offering, he was ashamed lest the priest take him for a common beggar. Near the temple grounds, an old man was sweeping out a tiny shop. At first, Muna would have walked past, pretending that he knew where he was headed. But a smell of bean soup from the open doorway overcame his pride. Please, forgive my rudeness, uncle. The man, hearing the boy's rough country accent, looked up, and the silence did not feel unkind, so it encouraged Muna to continue. I am only in the capital today. Now I must meet an acquaintance at the Rashomon gate. Muna stopped. His voice, which he had meant to sound manly and confident, merely sounded pompous. It betrayed his youth, for the man said, Don't go there after dark, son. Rashomon is the pickpocket's paradise. Muna was afraid if he spoke he might cry. So, with a laugh that ended more like a sob, he said, But it doesn't matter. I have no money. The old man shoved him into the house. Akiko, we have a guest for supper, he called. Then he turned to Muna. You must pay for your supper by telling my daughter and me your story, where you have come from, and how you made your journey to the capital. The girl who appeared was surprisingly young, about his own age, Muna guessed. The old man, watching him, laughed. A pretty blossom for an old gnarled branch like me, wouldn't you say? The boy hung his head, blushing as he did so. These city people could see into one's brain. Don't worry, I'm not offended. Now, his host indicated a cushion for Muna to sit upon. I am called Kawaki, the sandal maker. We are honored to have you in our humble shop. It is a rare treat for us to entertain a guest from the provinces. The warm food and the unexpected kindness of old Kawaki and the girl Akiko filled Muna with a kind of happiness that he had never known before. But they were humble people, and he did not want to seem arrogant by bragging to them about his samurai father. So in response to their questions, he simply said that he was an orphan who had come to Hyanko, determined to seek his fortune, and to amuse them, he told them of his adventures on the voyage. When he imitated Takanobu's ferocious manner, I am the king of the pirates. Akiku, who had said nothing as she shyly served his supper, became so caught up in the tale that she laughed aloud, forgetting to cover her mouth as she did so. Muna was pleased. He began to tell the story especially for her. Her dark eyes sparkled with pleasure. To have a girl of his own age, indeed any girl, admire him, cheered his spirit in much the same way that the bean soup warmed his belly. When he left the sandal maker's shop early the next morning, Kawaki and Akiko walked part way toward Rashomon Gate with him, begging him to come to see them again. He promised to do so, swearing to himself that he would reward them when he came into his inheritance. How beautiful the capital seemed to Muna that morning, with the sun setting, the clouds above the eastern hills afire. A pair of crows called to each other from neighboring roofs like a pair of old gossips. Muna wanted to laugh for joy. He broke into a little trot, taking deep gulps of the cool morning air as he ran. Then he slowed to a walk, for out of the morning haze ahead he could see the outlines of the great gate. As he neared it, he realized that the gray forms at the base of the columns were human. They were the beggars, who knew no other home. Muna had seated himself on the steps of the gate to wait for the Ronin when he heard a familiar sound. It was a healthy snore. "Takanobu!" the boy shouted with delight. He ran to the sleeping body and shook it. "It's me, Muna. I found my way at last." "Praise the devil!" snorted the Ronin, and rolled over to sleep again.